So this is a panel discussion amongst young entrepreneurs, Michael being one of them, and I'll introduce the others for you in a minute. Here they are. So Michael is there. Paris Smalls is co-founder and CEO of Eden GeoTech, and we'll talk in a minute what that is. Steph Speirs is co-founder and CEO of Solstice, and we'll talk about that too. And the moderator, delighted to have Barbara Clarke, again, back here also, a graduate of our master's program in 1991, and a terrific moderator. So thank you all for joining us here. And let me give a little bit more of an introduction to each of you, and then I will turn it over to Barbara to carry on the conversation. So Barbara, yourself, I will say, I think you founded, or not founded, you invested in about 60 companies and 12 funds all over the world. And you have been doing basically investing in emerging technology as part of your work and as part of what you founded, the Impact Seat, which is a focus for your work in creating opportunities for underrepresented entrepreneurs in particular, before this was sort of a fashionable thing to do. And before that, you worked as a managing consultant for KPMG, PwC. So I can tell the audience that every conversation I have with Barbara on anything is interesting and insightful. So Barbara, thank you for taking on the task today of moderating this panel. We will hear more from you in a minute. Thank you. I'll introduce Steph Speirs, who is co-founder of Solstice. And Solstice is a community solar farm sort of activity. She will tell you more about it. But basically, solar energy needs to be everywhere. And I think part of what I see Solstice do is to bring it to many communities and to enable that communities all over the United States are able to do that. And she has a background not in engineering, but a master's in public affairs in international economics and development. So some of what our students are taking is probably what Steph took in her graduate years. But then she worked also quite a bit all over the world, in Pakistan, in the Middle East, in India, and she managed actually the field operations in 7 states for the first Obama presidential campaign. So Steph, you certainly earned your spurs there, and we're delighted to see you apply it now to the field of climate tech. And Paris Smalls is currently a PhD student at MIT in geophysics. So if you think this stuff is complicated, Paris will figure it out for you. It's all about geophysics, and especially the heat and the pressures that occur deep in the earth. So Paris co-founded the Eden GeoTech, which is a geothermal company. She'll tell you more about it. And from what I understand, it's gone through some pivoting and some evolution in terms of how it addresses climate tech, and Paris will certainly talk more about that. But he comes from a deep knowledge and research base in the PhD work that he's doing at MIT. And I'm sure he's got a bunch of patents to his name too. So thank you all. I'm going to retreat into the background again. Barbara, you have the mic, and please carry on the discussion. And I'll remind the audience for once that we will run this until 11:30. And if you have questions, now is the time. You can put it into the question tab at the bottom of your webinar screen. I will see those questions. The panelists don't see them right away, but I will see the questions, and I will come on in the last 10, 15 minutes and share some of the audience questions with the panel and have further discussion about that. And then we break on time at 11:30. All right, thank you.
All right, we can jump right in. Are we going to take the slide down so that we can all see all of our faces? Great. We had a long pre-call, so I'm anxious about like getting through a lot of content here because everybody had a lot of good ideas. So jump in. Also, Ben, you run a really tight ship. We are 1 minute ahead of schedule. So jumping right in, my first question is for Paris. You know, what were you like as a student? You're still a student, so maybe as an undergrad, and sort of, did you see yourself as an entrepreneur? And what message would you say you have to current students? I know Michael had some nice messages for the student, but I'd like to hear what you have to say and how you would what were there encouraging things that were said to you that you would want to have said to others?
Yeah, I can quickly go through like my life as a student, not just undergrad. Um, so as a kid, I was really studious. I used to love reading. My mom used to make sure that I read books. I had to report to her on what the book said, and she was very, serious about that. It's outside of schoolwork, just like, hey, Paris, you got to read these books. A lot of it was because I was a bit disobedient, so a lot of the books were like obedience books on how to be a good child. So it was pretty funny. I always been a little bit of a rebel. As I got a little bit older, I stopped working so much and learning. I lost my curiosity. Started doing athletics. I played football in high school. I went to the University of South Carolina where I ran track with a scholarship, and I did that in undergraduate for about 2 years. Actually got into geophysics because I'm from Georgia, and South Carolina being a border state, it allowed me to get in-state tuition to study geophysics. So I saved $10,000 a year. And I was like, okay, well, I remember being smart as a kid. Math is very natural for me. I'll just do this geophysics thing. Didn't really know what it was. So really started liking it a lot more than I liked track, and just spent the last 3 years of my undergraduate getting really into math again, getting really into physics again, and had this crazy idea that I'm going to go to MIT. I think I can do it. So studied hard, did pretty well on the tests, and got into MIT. I got into entrepreneurship because MIT has a super big like sort of ecosystem. All of my friends were starting companies. And I didn't want to be that guy that was like, oh, I knew this guy back then and now he's a millionaire. I wanted to be right there in the ship, and I wasn't invited. They were starting these companies and not asking me to co-found it with them. So I said, you know what, I'm going to co-found Eden. And it's based on my background in geophysics, and now we're here. To any students who are looking to start their own companies, I would say, I think if I can go back and do my journey again, I would have waited towards the end of my PhD and not the beginning. I started literally, my second year of graduate school. I'm a fifth year now, and I kind of caused a lot of troubles regarding the work I need to get done. But I pushed through, and we're here now. But wait until the end of your schooling if you want to do it. There are many opportunities to go out there and start your company, get early stage funding. Pitch competitions are a good way to start, and see what traction you can get before you fully commit.
Great. Turning to Steph, inequality is pervasive and systemic. I'd love to hear how you're sort of battling it both in all of the elements of your business.
I think that's one of probably our greatest lessons from the last year as a society is that, there's a Warren Buffett quote that only when the tide goes out do you see who's swimming naked. And the pandemic was the tide going out, and we saw what structures and systems had deep cracks in its foundations and were fundamentally broken. In the climate space that we work in, the people that need energy savings the most, low to moderate income Americans, people who are Black and brown, who are disproportionately affected by climate change, they're currently the least likely to get access to clean energy. They're also the ones that suffer the most from our environmental problems. They live closer to fossil fuels. Statistically, studies show they have higher burdens of energy burdens, which means they pay a bigger portion of their salary on energy. They have higher incidences of asthma and air pollution, which is leading to COVID morbidity. And they're the least likely to get access to clean energy and energy savings. And what's cool about this moment in history is that the way we've gotten our electricity hasn't changed in over 100 years, but it's changing so rapidly right now. Climate is one of the hottest topics in the country, and climate innovations are badly needed. So it's not a question of whether we're going to switch to green energy in the next decade. It will happen. It's a question of whether the benefits will be equitable, whether they'll be shared by everyone. And so we have seen that a rising tide does not lift all boats organically. Some of us are in boats, some of us are in yachts, some of us are in leaky dinghies. And the more people that are in leaky dinghies structurally, the worse all of our healths are. And so if we want to make sure that this planet exists for our grandchildren, if we want to make sure that everyone gets a fair shot at a healthy life, we need to make sure that our climate transition to green power is equitable. And so that's the work that Solstice does. We put solar in the hands of people who have not had access before. And there's a new type of solar that allows for that called community solar. I'll stop there for now, though.
But actually, so I'll ask you a little follow-up too, because so it's not just your company and the market that you're serving, it's also how you structured your company, also how you take capital for your company. So just give a little bit on that too.
Yeah, so Solstice is one of the only companies that has been founded by women of color and run by women of color in the entire country. And so our team is, I think, a little more diverse than you'll see a typical clean energy company be. In clean energy, only 25% of people working in clean energy are women. And then when you look at people of color working in clean energy, it's much, much lower than that. So we put a lot of effort to making sure that our organization is inclusive. And that means doing things like offering parental leave as a startup that can be difficult, but doing that, offering health benefits. We have 5 weeks of vacation a year. If anyone wants to look, we have job openings on our website, and also just making sure that we're paying a living wage. Our minimum wage for interns is $15, which is better than the country's minimum wage. And our living wage is priced per geography where people are living in. So by supporting our employees, we are trying to make a company that is more thoughtful and more equitable than just our work to create equity in the solar industry.
One thing that we all discussed in our sort of pre-meeting was how broken venture capital is. And that, to me, it's quite a broken system. For the obvious things that a lot of people know is that, less than 3% of venture capital goes to women, and most of them are white women. They essentially don't fund women of color. Black and Latino men do not get, they're basically a rounding error as well. So just the lack of funding. And then the other thing that is annoying to me is the control that they have, that venture capital has, of the narrative of like, who's an entrepreneur? What do they look like? And also, it can also distort the way we think about company formation. So Michael, I know you have, you've done a lot of different kinds of companies and raised a lot of different kind of capital. I would love you just to walk through some of the capital that you've raised, maybe give some examples of it. And then the rest of us will raise our hands if we've also participated in that way, because I would love for the takeaway for folks to know, like, there's more than just talking to VCs out there. There's a lot of different sources of capital. And I think, Michael, you have probably accessed all of it at some point in time, maybe.
Most of it. I've definitely been after all of it. So first of all, thank you for bringing up those statistics about disparities that exist in the venture capital world. It's something that I write extensively about. I spent half my book talking about it and solutions for that. So I'm really happy that it's part of the narrative. It's great. It's great that people are just talking about it. That is the first step. And I think it's important to know when you say that, like less than 3% of founders are Black, less than 10% are women, we're not talking about the 1950s. We're talking about 2020. I mean, that's pretty screwed up. I mean, if Google was hiring 3% Black people and 1 or 10% women, it would be boycotting Google in a heartbeat. However, the venture capital industry is here to stay and they control the narrative. And I don't want to sound conspiratorial, but I am super happy that we're discussing this in an open forum and it's not a taboo discussion in some progressive circles in the corner, because this is a real issue. Before I talk about how I raise money, I'm gonna take like 2 minutes, just a little liberty, if you don't mind, and talk about some of the fundamental reasons that the most popular source of capital, being venture capital and angel capital, has kind of become skewed in this way. So I'm going to take us back to the 1920s. I know this seems like a huge deviation, but about the 1920s, there was a lot of fraud in the investment world. So there was snake oil salesmen saying, invest in my company, I'm going to make you millions of dollars, you're going to be rich. And they were lying. So Congress noticed, and Congress said, well, we got to protect investors. So we're going to do this. We're going to make a rule. We're going to make a rule that if it's a private company, as in a company that's not audited, that's not publicly listed, that's not peer reviewed, if you're a private company, like a startup, you can only raise money from what they termed accredited investors. Now, accredited investors have evolved that term to present day, but it's still present. An accredited investor basically means a millionaire. So you have to make over $250,000 a year for a few years. You have to have a value of over $1 million, things like that. I'll just call them millionaires. So Congress thought at the time that it was a really great idea in the 1920s to say that if you're a millionaire, you're sophisticated enough to invest, you are sophisticated enough to not get swindled, and you're sophisticated enough to do your diligence on this opportunity. Great idea as far as protecting consumers, regular Joe Schmoes. The problem is that to this day, and currently 2020, about 86% of the millionaires in this country are white men over the age of 60. So white men over the age of 60 are institutionally the only ones allowed to invest in startups to this day. Here comes the exception. So this leads to a lot. I can rattle off some statistics. Some of them will be shocking. Some of them will be understandable. But there's a lot of legacy attached to why this happens. And it's been studied extensively. And like I said, I'm super happy that we're finally talking about this in a public forum. The fascinating thing is in 2008, after we had the big stock market crash, the credit derivatives, liquidity crunch, all that kind of stuff, venture capitalists, angels stopped investing money into early stage companies, into startups. So Congress said, well, there's got to be a different way. We got to reform that industry. That industry has a track record of not representing all types of ideas, not representing all types of founders. It's just not a really good source of capital. And now they're just not active. So they introduced a series of reforms as part of the Jobs Act. So in 2008, they introduced something that they called equity crowdfunding. Equity crowdfunding, they were kind of playing off the popular verbiage at the time with Kickstarter being very popular. And basically what they mean by equity crowdfunding is that regular unaccredited investors, non-millionaires, are now allowed to invest in startups. The startup just has to go through a pretty basic disclosure saying this is how much money we make. These are the risk factors associated with the business, describe the business, the customers, things like that. Nothing like a public company. Really very straightforward things to educate the investor. And in turn, Congress said, well, the investor can only invest X% of their wealth and put out some other restrictions on it. But it's a great compromise. So basically what they said, regular people can now invest in Facebook before Facebook became public. Regular people, if they see the value in Twitter, they can invest in Twitter before it became public. Giving power, economic power to people across the spectrum, demographically, geographically, in every single way. And you see participation in the equity crowdfunding world with people, regular Joe Schmoes investing into crowdfunding, equity crowdfunding, buying stocks and securities from companies at an all-time high as far as diversification of the investor. So no more dominating older white males. That's the industry I'm very passionate about. It's called equity crowdfunding. Like I mentioned, I spend most of my book talking about that and how we as a society need to evolve from the venture capital and angel capital model to the equity crowdfunding model. It's just much more inclusive. So my company, GeoOrbital, is the first company to raise over $1 million in rewards crowdfunding, in our case on Kickstarter, and over $1 million in equity crowdfunding. That is a main source of capital for GeoOrbital. And I like it because it represents the mission and the impact that I want to have in the world, as well as capitalize my company to the point that I need it to be. We've also raised angel and venture capital funding. So these things are not necessarily competitive, although there's definitely, we're in a ring, we're fighting, boxing is happening. So it's still a very young industry. Again, it was made illegal in 2008, but it only became available in 2016. So the whole equity crowdfunding space is about 4 years old. It's minute compared to venture capital, but it is an emerging field. So yeah.
I like crowdfunding, whether they be rewards or equity, but I like them as like a good indicator of like your connection to your customer, because it's sort of like it's a vote of support in many cases. Have you ever gotten SBIR funding?
I have applied for it. I have never received the grants, but I do know plenty of people who have.
And Paris, I believe you've received. Paris and Steph, have you received SBIR funding? So I'll just give a clarification, and if each of you want to just maybe say a couple of words about this. SBIR is sort of an umbrella organization of the government. They fund private companies $4 billion worth a year into innovations that the different departments, like the Defense Department, National Institute for Health, National Science Foundation, et cetera, Department of Energy and so forth, things that they're looking for, and then they give it, they fund grants. You don't have to pay it back, not a loan, and they don't own any of your companies. So I'd love to hear, Steph and Paris, what have been your experiences with SBIR? And I think it's incredibly important, early money for companies.
I think it's important to talk about some failures that we've had with students and present in the audience. And actually, we won an SBIR grant, and we got to the point where the day they were supposed to issue the money to our bank accounts, we realized that we had checked the wrong box in the application. We're a hybrid organization. So we have a 501c3 nonprofit and a for-profit, and we checked the box for hybrid. And SBIR grants can only go to the for-profit. So it was a very technical mistake that I made that meant that we lost out on the $1.5 million grant that we had spent a year applying for. And so that's all to say that with government grants, please make sure that you check every one of your 60 pages on your application.
That could be this could be a topic for another time. There are a lot of companies doing these hybrids of having the 501c3 and a for-profit as well.
Yeah, and I will say that on the grant side from the Department of Energy, we've won over $1 million in grant, just straight up grant funding from the Department of Energy too.
Yeah, so now Paris, have you gotten SBIR or other non-dilutive is which, for folks at home?
Yeah, we've got an SBIR phase 1 and phase 2. This is before they went to 1.5, so it was only 1 million. And non-dilutive total, maybe another 300,000. So like 1.3 non-dilutive funding for a hardware company is necessary. We have really long timelines. It's going to take us, 3-4 years before we really commercialize. Like we're just not getting to the point where we're getting our first contract. We've been around since 2017 because we have to literally build everything from the ground up, and every product that we make costs around $1 million. I could quickly talk about what the company does. We're pretty much a reservoir stimulation, or you can call it a fracking company, but it's not fracking like we think of it. We're trying to replace hydraulic fracking with a new electrical fracking method. So you have all the same benefits of being able to break open a rock. It could be applied also in the geothermal industry, but you don't consume so much water. And that's what the SBIR grant was funded for. It is without a doubt the company wouldn't be here without government support at the early stages. And they also they have like this thing called SBIR Phase 2B if you're with the NSF, to where they match you 50 cents on the dollar up to $1 million in dilutive funding that you raise, and we're going to be applying for that pretty soon. It's a really good partner to have, to go after these SBIR grants while you're really early.
Yeah, and it takes some detective work because I find it's not super organized centrally, but if you have a company in education technology, healthcare, there's so many different areas that, there's probably some SBIR focus on that. Did you have something to say, Michael?
Yeah, I just want to add like a really quick note. A lot of people think that grant funding is free money, and it's actually not. One of the big advantages that a startup has over a large company is the ability to pivot, to move into some new thing, hire new people, change their presence in the market, pivot in any way you want to define that term. Taking a grant eliminates that. You can't not do what you take the money for. You are committing yourself. You're obligating yourself to that. So for some companies, that's not really an issue. But for many it is. And I've actually, honestly, just, advising companies and running my own, I've advised people to not accept money. Because there is a real attached cost to it. And one of the biggest advantages you have against, established competitors, the big guys, is that you can pivot and you don't really have a crazy amount of cost associated with it normally to pivot. But if you take a grant, you now do. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that because I think, with every single thing that you do, there's always ways around things. So like, for instance, with our company, you're right. When we took on the grant, that core team had to focus on that grant, right? You have maybe two people dedicating, 40 hours a week to that grant. Other 10 hours could be used for other things. You could also build a separate team. And that's one thing that we've done. So we kept the core team on the grant, hired new people, and had them going after that different technology so that we could pivot. Because you're right, to start, you want to be flexible. You don't want to overcommit, but there are ways around it where you can use the grant process to your advantage without getting sucked into a hole. So I also wanted to say to anybody that was kind of on the fence, taking both perspectives, there are ways around it if you think through how you can use these things to your advantage.
Yeah, and I think, and it's also, taking any kind of capital too early is really, outside capital too early can be really detrimental, because you're right, maybe it locks you into a certain pathway that you're not, interested in, ultimately, and restricts your ability to pivot. So let's see. So we've got a few more minutes before we do the Q&A. So I'm going to do some rapid fire ones. Let's do this one. So if you had a magic wand and could make one big change, whether it be policy or market or cultural, to catapult your company and your innovation, what would it be? And why don't we go, because on my screen I'll go Michael, Steph, Paris.
There's so many things that I think can be improved. One, access to capital. I think my industry, my company, the cohort that I'm taking my startup journey with would really benefit from a much more diverse group of investors with a much more diverse focus on what they fund. Those, I forgot what you call them, the blink diagrams that you showed earlier in the report are a great example of that. The things that interest investors are not the things that interest people at large. Regular folks see the future very differently than a group of select experts. And I would quote the word experts because there's actually plenty of studies saying that experts aren't actually really good at predicting things. So I would like a cultural change where regular people agree, and it's a consensus algorithm, kind of like the blockchain. And we all kind of agree on what the future is, because that type of thing is much more predictive of success and impact.
On my end, I think that sometimes we hear businesses say, oh, we can't hire diverse talent because there's a pipeline problem. There's not enough people out there. And that is factually incorrect. We don't have a pipeline problem. We have a network problem. And when it comes to access to capital, I believe there's enough capital out there. That's one of the greatest lessons I've learned as an entrepreneur.
Money they dumped into WeWork. There's plenty of money around to go around for lots of.
Exactly. There's a lot of capital out there. We just need to learn to channel it to people and populations that don't have access to those networks. And so I think in the beginning, when you're starting your company, there's an overemphasis on financial capital. I need to get money in the door because that's how you do your job, to be sure. But what I've learned is that emphasizing social capital has led to much more sustainable and successful outcomes for our company. And by that, I mean, when you're just starting out, talk to as many people as possible about your idea. And the ones that continue to listen to you drone on about your idea, those are your advisors, and build out that network of advisors. And the more that you build out that network, the more the capital will come in, and you won't have to take capital from people whose values you don't align with. And so I think there needs to be more effort to teaching people, how do you build your network? How do you do the process of fundraising, not just how do you pitch your company?
Yeah, if I had a magical wand, what I would wish for is a little bit more education on geothermal. A lot of people don't.
Yes, because I thought it's all like these geothermal like units for your house. So yes, I was completely uninformed.
Yeah, a lot of people don't really understand. Like every time I say I do geothermal, they're like, "Oh, I have a geothermal house." They're like, everybody says that. Everybody says that. And it's there's a difference. You have geothermal heat, you have geothermal power. Most people don't even know how the earth can generate power, right? So it's a steam cycle. So it's like it's relatively simple once people get it, but most people don't get it. A lot of people don't even know the earth has a core. They just think it's just a rock, So there's a lot of it's not as popular. It's not as popular as like solar and wind, which you see every single day. You just like have a really strong intuition for it, right? Like a lot of stuff that's going on in geothermal and geophysics is beneath our feet. We don't really get to see it, and there's a lot of misinformation or no information at all. So I think education will get a lot more people excited. They're like, "Oh yeah, I get it now. Like, we should be doing this. It's base load, it's renewable, it's all these great things. You don't have to worry about storage with geothermal because it's always there." So there's a lot of that I think needs to happen within my industry to really make it take off.
Great. Now I think we're at 9 minutes past the hour, and we're supposed to switch at 10 minutes past the hour to questions. So in keeping with Ben's, tight ship, I will turn it over to Ben to sort of get the questions going.
Barbara, thank you. You're acting as if you were still my student and following the class time. But
I say what my magic wand I should have said too was I would like an instant carbon tax. As an economist, we know that that would work. So anyway.
absolutely. Anyway, this is a great conversation, and I hate to be standing now in the middle of it, but I want to just channel some of the questions that have come online, and I think Paris, you saw one of them. It is from Luisa Reyes, one of our master students in social impact, and she asks Paris specifically, what could improve or grow the entrepreneurship ecosystem in the Southeast of the United States?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. Something I think about all the time as well. Like, why is it that we have this super big concentration of, like, clean tech, engineering in general in Massachusetts, Boston area, right? It's because we have these awesome universities where these young innovators are coming out with these really cool ideas, right? And they have a place to where they can congregate, whether it's within a local university like Greentown, there's all these resources for them to be able to build and grow their teams. And because of that, the VCs come in and they put their money here. Same thing happens in Silicon Valley. So I think if you build it, they will come mentality will probably work for the Southeast, to where you create these places, similar to like an incubator, where you help people grow, learn. You have like a target on what the mission of this place is going to be. And then from there, you can have more investors come in, and you get more investors, you get more innovation, and it can keep growing itself. But so many people just want to focus on these hot spots, and they go, oh, this is where it's hot, this is where it's hot. And they don't really want to put the investment in these other places, and they don't understand, why it's important. If we're talking about diversity, honestly, you're not going to get much diversity if you only invest in, the Northeast, right, or the West Coast. The Southeast actually has a lot more diverse people if you really want to tackle this kind of issue. So this is where you need to go. So you got to step out of your comfort zone and maybe take a little bit more time and build it putting the infrastructure in place first, making sure the people that want to innovate have the resources, and then go from there. If I were to do this from like a purely practical perspective, like Paris, do this tomorrow, where would you go? I'm from Georgia. I know Georgia Tech's a great engineering school, Southeast, right in the heart of Atlanta. I think that would be a really good place to start, right? And places like that where you're going to have really good talent. So there are ways to do it. It's going to take effort. It's going to take a little bit of outside the box thinking. But I think you start with putting together the infrastructure, and then from there, the capital will go into it.
And I just want to add on, because I invest across the United States, so I have invested in companies from all different parts. And it is this sort of obnoxious stranglehold narrative that the venture capitalists will say. They'll say, I'm not going to invest in some company that's more than a 2-hour drive from where I work. And I think that's absurd. And just, yeah. And so it's just completely ridiculous. First of all, I don't want to spend 2 hours in my car anyway. And now with the pandemic, I mean, at least, in theory, folks have been making more investments into companies where they haven't actually forced them to meet in person. So.
Interesting. There's a whole set of questions there about as we get more distance communication and work from home, post-COVID, whatever you want to call it, will some of these patterns that we see change and maybe break the deadlock of geography? Anybody have a thought about that? Is that something that you see, or?
I agree. I raised a small convertible note last year entirely on Zoom. I'm about to raise a Series A. It will be entirely on Zoom. And can you imagine raising $5 to $10 million without meeting a single person in person? And because we live in a new world where talent is demanding more flexibility in their work schedule and people don't want to be tied to an office 5 days a week, I think we're going to see fundamental shifts away from geographic proximity to let's just get best talent, let's motivate best talent, let's reinvent the ways to build culture in this new remote world.
Yeah, thank you, Steph. In fact, there's a question here, Steph, maybe in this line for you. How did your team secure financial support for Solstice employee benefits and the pay equity that you mentioned? This student is curious what framing you use to get support from investors. How do they read that policy of yours?
Yeah, so two things. One is when you're picking your investors, you are basically picking partners for life. You are basically picking spouses. If you can imagine, that requires a higher level of diligence. It has to be a two-way street. There has to be mutual love there. And you should vet people based on having alignment with your own values. And for us, treating our customers well, treating our employees well, and treating our investors well are all goals of our organization. And so we need investors who support that. So that's very much on the table. If you know anything about Solstice, you know that we're fighting for access for underserved communities. And there are VCs out there for the scariest thing to them is to say, I want to serve low-income customers. They will run in the opposite direction. But we've managed to find incredible investors who are mission-driven, who recognize that a return on investment means also having a planet for your grandchildren to be around, that maybe return on investment just doesn't mean your quarterly returns. And then the second part of this answer and this question is also that the world that we live in doesn't incentivize companies and company leadership to do extra steps to like pay equity. It doesn't incentivize companies to pay more than the minimum wage. That's just the world we live in. And so if you're going to do it as a company, you have to be sure that you're still financially successful as a company. If we were financially a failure, investors wouldn't allow us to do all these things like pay equity, provide 5 weeks of vacation a year and things like that. You have to be financially successful in order to do these benefits. And the thing is, we've realized is those are not always mutually exclusive. It's assumed they are, but they're not. And it takes some kind of moral leadership to go outside the bounds, and also hopefully good policy that forces companies to pay a living wage someday.
And I would just reiterate, I think, investors, entrepreneurs need to really vet their investors, because if you explain, like, this is how we treat our employees, this is what we do, and they give you pushback, there are folks who think you shouldn't be paying anybody until you've raised your Series A. And that's just insane, because people have to eat and pay their rent. They don't all get to live in their mother's basement. So I think it's really important to push back early and realize, like, oh, maybe this investor is not for us.
Can I say one thing about hiring diversity and it's related to how much you pay people, is like, if we live in a world where all startups assume we have to not offer people benefits and we can't pay them a living wage, we will continue to perpetuate a world in which only affluent folks work in entrepreneurship. And, in this world, money, if you're an oppressed, marginalized, Black and brown person of color, money is liberation in this world. And who are we to say that the only people that can access the startup world are people who don't require societal liberation? And that's just not the world we should be creating.
Thank you, Steph. That's awesome. I mean, when we think about the amount of money awash in the world in an aggregate sense, and that people are writing blank checks that end up acquiring companies, and then we talk about the difficulty for entrepreneurs to get it, either for their project or because of their background. There's a disconnect there, and Steph, I hear what you say about the social network being really the key part rather than the aggregate amount. Let me see if we have another question here. How can you help across countries to build co-investments, to forge global collaborations to solve some of these challenges? Well, obviously, we know there's a lot of talk between governments, and we have a session of that tomorrow with the United Nations and others to talk about cross national collaboration at the sort of macro level. What about at the firm level? And that too, we have another session tomorrow about specific collaboration between American firms and Israeli firms. Have you all worked on this collaboratively across borders, and can you comment on that?
So I've taken money from other countries, from my companies, from angel investors, even venture capitalists. But I think, like I said, I think that's kind of a dinosaur of a model, and I think it's evolving or dying. I'm not sure which one, but one of those two. I think currently, again, in the reforms that kind of the whole world adopted, you can form what are called angel syndicates, which is a way to syndicate investments. So it's to make a special purpose vehicle like an LLC A bunch of people from all over the world put money into the LLC, and the LLC invests. And then there's other stages for private equity for later stage companies. So I think the things that you're going to be talking about are for later stage companies. The biggest problem is the top of the funnel stuff. It's the early stage, right? It's the entrepreneur that has this great revolutionary idea that's going to change the world, and they need 50 grand to get it off the ground. They need 50 grand to prototype something. I mean, we're talking about micro capital in the grand scheme of things. And that's where most ideas die. It really is. And that's the unfortunate truth. And it ties back to what we're talking about, diversity of founders, access to capital, but it's those small checks. So let's say under $1 million. Under $1 million, if you want to raise that, you can do that through equity crowdfunding from regular investors all over the world that believe in your idea. That is why this space is revolutionary, because you're not talking about, these millionaires that look at their prototypical large companies and look at balance sheets and look at all that stuff. You're talking to visionaries. You're talking to people who think this should be the future, and they're willing to put in $100 to support that. And you get $100 from a lot of people, and you can prove your idea. And then you can get the VC money, and then you can get the private equity money, and then you can do the collaborations with Israel and the United Nations. But it got to start somewhere. And I honestly think that the biggest challenge is that first capital. And most of the companies I've worked with, that's the challenge. And for that, our government, Congress, bipartisanly, shockingly, but in a bipartisan effort, they approve this. Believe it or not, our government loves small businesses. They love innovation. And in 2008, and became illegal in 2016, they finally allowed that to happen. So yes, my practical advice for an early stage company, equity crowdfunding. That's probably the easiest way, not for every sector, but for most sectors to get their first round, maybe a first couple of rounds of funding.
I'm probably in about, through my funds, I'm probably in like 30 or 40 deals outside the United States. So there is a different mentality, because obviously if you're a company in Norway, Norway has a particular kind of capital market. And so you're already thinking about raising capital from other places. And you're also thinking, Norway's not my only market. So, you have a different mentality. It's kind of like if you're in Massachusetts and you're like, well, yeah, I want customers in Texas, so I want investors in Texas. So I actually find that those cross collaborations are very common. I mean, I have lots of companies that I've invested in really early, like the first round, whether it's Israeli companies or European companies and whatever. So I think that it's the issue is who's on the ground and what's the network that you can bring to bear. Because I've had lots of companies that were in Spain and they were really looking to expand into Germany. And so German investors were really important for their capital and their network. And it goes a little bit to what Steph was talking about is, social capital is just as important as financial capital.
Yeah, I can kind of give the startup perspective because we're actually heavily involved in projects in Saudi Arabia. And it's mainly because my co-founder is Saudi Arabian. So what we've done is we've recently started a subsidiary there, and we've gotten support from a research institution that's supported by the government to help them do some of their first geothermal studies in the entire country. And we put together a consortium between our company, United States, a couple other US companies, and that research university to do this. So from the startup perspective, yeah, it makes a lot of sense to rely on the backgrounds of the people in your team. He's Saudi, we have another Iranian guy, we have people who really understand the culture and kind of using that as an end, both for getting the project and also getting the capital we need to execute the project. I don't think we could have done it just with me as an American going there and saying, hey, I think Saudi Arabia is a great place to do geothermal, let me go there,
Yeah, great. Steph, you've been all over the world. What's your sense for this cross-border collaboration on actual entrepreneurship projects?
Well, it's the same as with solving climate change, right? We need to get everyone across the world to collaborate and cooperate and coming up with solutions, because the more parochial we are, the more we're self-sabotaging ourselves. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to take up too much time because I know there's other questions, but we have found that collaborating with investors that come from abroad has been really key for us, as well as partnering with companies that are energy companies that are headquartered abroad. So two of our biggest investors are a French energy company and one of our a French solar development company. So that's powering ourselves through the best practices from abroad is key to moving forward faster.
Terrific. Terrific. Thank you. So another question is on that front end of the pipeline question, the sort of the early ideas, Mike, that you were just talking about. This is from Sonali Anderson, one of our great undergraduate students interested in social impact too. For young entrepreneurs, do you think startup accelerators, programs, and competitions, for example, the Clean Tech Open that Alistair mentioned, or Mass Challenge, etc., are these great ways to seek funding for innovative ideas? Or maybe more generally, what is the value that one gets from these various accelerators and mentor networks that we know in the Boston area, New York area are very strong?
Let me answer that. That's a great question. I actually think it's a complicated answer, which I'll make really short. So there's two types of accelerator incubator structures. There's for-profit and not-for-profit. So Mass Challenge is a non-for-profit. Clean Tech Open, which I went through, by the way, is a non-for-profit. And then there's for-profit, like Techstars, Y Combinator 500 startups. I actually went through Techstars as well. So there's a big difference between those two. The non-profit ones, I think, are worth it. Straight up, there are some caveats, but yes, do it. It's awesome. You don't have to agree with everything you're saying. And just the one thing you remember is you're the boss. You're the one staying up at night making all the decisions about your company. But it's great to get that diversity of ideas. The for-profit ones are more like farms for venture capitalists. So if you go to Techstars, you go to Y Combinator, you go to 500 Startups, or any of those brand name ones that advertise everywhere, like you've seen them, they sponsor events, they put their logos everywhere. The reason they do that is because they make a lot of money doing it. It's a business. And generally, the people who fund them are VC. So if you're entering those accelerators, you're effectively being trained to be good at getting VC money, to be very VC compliant. Now, that is great for some organizations, for some startups, but it's actually a pretty decent hurdle for others to overcome. So I would say, without going too much into it, because this is kind of a big topic, I would say for-profits good, for-profits maybe.
I would add there's also another kind of accelerator, which is a corporate strategic partner startup. You've got the Chobanis, you've got Constant Contact, things like that. And I think that, and those typically won't take any capital from you. They're a little bit more like the nonprofit model. And I think Salesforce, one of my companies just did a Salesforce one. And I think going into any accelerator, like, well, what do I want to get out of this? Do I want to just like have a incubator where my idea is nurtured? Or I'm going, for example, into the Salesforce one because I want to really hone my enterprise sales strategy.
Yeah, I give my input. I've done the whole gambit from the MIT Clean Energy Prize, which is our first pitch competition, multiple pitch competitions, one at ASUIO, incubators at Greentown Labs, accelerators where they took capital, applied to Techstars twice, got to the finals recently, but didn't make it, applied to Y Combinator before. So so applied to really good ones, didn't get into those, got into one that wasn't as good. And I guess overall, my experience is definitely do pitch competitions without a doubt, because that's, you can really hone your pitch skills. You don't have to give up any equity. You can't really lose, right? A lot of the reason you do these things to make really good networks. You get those same networks at pitch competitions where you have the VCs in the audience. They might follow with you later, or they might not, but it's a way to get exposure. I kind of agree with Michael with the accelerator thing. Like the ones that I've gotten the most benefit out of have been non-dilutive. Like I'm in one right now with Ernst & Young, completely free. And the guy, he's passionate. He really sits back and he works with me. I call him, he's there. He's doing it for the right reasons, right? The one I went through a corporate one, Ameren, Fortune 500 energy company based in St. Louis. Sat there for 12 weeks. They took, X% equity in my company. Worked with when I was there, but then we're just so busy. I haven't heard from them in the past year and a half. And then I'm like, man, you have a big check in my company. We won't even talk. This really sucks, And you don't want to get into the hole of being like a accelerator person, right? Like, oh, you're in all these accelerators. All you do is accelerators, and and you lost that edge about you of being a real startup. And the one thing you should be focused on as a startup isn't raising money, isn't accelerators and all that. That's great, it's part of it. But if you could do anything and do anything well, it's making money, making money, selling your product, bringing in revenue. And they kind of teach you this a little bit, but not really well enough. And I'm starting to see as I grow as an entrepreneur, I spent so much time thinking about how to raise money and what's the best way to pitch investors. I didn't really spend enough time really thinking about how to make money, how to sell the product. And because of that, it's been hard to raise money at times, But when I kind of transitioned to going back to square one and being like, how do I make a really good product? How do I focus on building something that can sell? The money, people just start throwing money at you, and it's a lot different. So don't be an accelerator person. Do pitch competitions without a doubt. And if you can do the ones that don't take equity, do those. They're overrated, in my opinion. I think they're overrated.
That's awesome. I mean, this is a classic case of we're going to leave them wanting more, because this conversation I can see is not only really interesting, but very useful to our students. So we are out of time, and I know that some of you have a hard stop at 11:30. So let's everybody there, about 87 of us, let's give us a round of applause to this great panel, and to a wonderful seeing Alistair again. And Dean Grady, thank you for your part in the program today, Alistair, for your partnership.